A ring, a silk nightgown, a stranger in the doorway calling himself her husband. Morning light cuts across a cold Vegas mansion and Avery wakes into a life she does not remember choosing. The diamond on her hand glitters like a threat. Damien stands in the doorway, elegant, unreadable, devastatingly calm, offering her 6 months as his wife in exchange for survival. Then the world keeps tightening. Family dinners that feel like interrogations, whispered threats in empty hallways, cameras flashing outside galleries, blood on concrete, hospital monitors in the dark. This is not romance. This is a slow-motion collision between desperation and destiny.
Avery Lane resurfaces into a new reality. Chained to a stranger, a titan of crime with an ultimatum. She could perform the role of his wife for 6 months, or he would incinerate the remnants of her world. Their contract, born in a Las Vegas palace, is a prelude to a storm of violence. She will escape. He will be left for dead. In the aftermath, she becomes a ghost by his bedside, tortured by the question of love's value amidst lies and destruction. Our analysis begins as her life implodes. The first texture she perceives is silk. This is not imitation finery, but authentic material, flowing like liquid and bearing a cost that eclipses her monthly obligations. Then the piercing Nevada light invades through unfamiliar expansive windows. The third assault is the ring. An immense foreign diamond on her left hand, an emblem of judgment. As she sits bolt upright, her head throbs violently. A crippling hangover descends. The room spins with nauseating force, and a brutal pulse hammers behind her eyes. Her palate is a desert of cheap spirits and regrettable decisions. Her gaze falls upon a silk garment she has never owned. Oh God, she murmurs a mantra of denial. Oh no, no, no. The chamber is cavernous and antiseptic, emanating a silent wealth accumulated over generations. Somber walls display expensive abstract pieces with furnishings straight from an architectural digest. This opulence is a universe away from her Henderson apartment, a territory she was never meant to enter. As Avery's feet touch the ground, a voice cuts through the silence. You are awake. She pivots abruptly, losing her balance in a wave of vertigo. Silhouetted in the doorway stands a complete stranger, tall, dark-haired, and impeccably attired for any hour. His features are chiseled, but his gaze captures hers with unnerving focus. His eyes, the shade of steel, are purely analytical, the lens of a hunter that observes all while betraying nothing. Who the hell are you? Avery's voice is a ragged whisper. Damien Vascari, he states, the name a self-contained explanation. Your husband. The 2 words detonate in the stillness. He enters with an aura of absolute ownership, claiming the very atmosphere and, it seems, her as well. He produces a folded document, a marriage license from Clark County, dated only 3 hours prior. Avery regards it as if it were a coiled serpent, unthinkable. The Bourbon Street Wedding Chapel, a makeshift veil of cocktail napkins. Your vows were reportedly moving. His delivery is monotone, yet laced with a palpable menace. You have no recollection? I don't recall events that never occurred. The state of Nevada would dispute that. She snatches the document and confronts the evidence, her own signature. A frantic, inebriated script, but unmistakably hers. Beside it, his name, Damien Vascari. The timestamp reads 2:47 a.m., just hours before. This is insane. Her hands tremble. This isn't binding. We can seek an annulment immediately. We could, Damien concedes, arms folded, exuding an unhurried patience. Alternatively, you could entertain my proposition. Entertain you? A sharp, incredulous laugh escapes her. I awaken in a stranger's room dressed in... She gestures at the slip. Were you responsible for this? My staff attended to it. You spoiled your own gown with champagne. How wonderful. That clarifies everything. Sit. Excuse me. Sit. The word is not a request. The sheer command in his voice weakens her resolve. She sinks onto the mattress, clutching the certificate like a profane artifact as Damien closes the distance, standing over her. He remains still, hands pocketed, observing her as one would an equation to be solved. I will state this a single time, he begins. Listen closely. Last night we were legally married. This is an indisputable fact. While I also lack the memory, the documentation is real. I present two options. The first, I initiate an annulment. We dismiss it as an error, and you return to your existence. Fine. Yes, I choose that. The second option, he continues, ignoring her completely, is that you remain my wife for 6 months. You perform the role, presenting a convincing illusion for my social circle. In return, I erase your debts, provide residence, and you depart with $500,000. Avery can only stare. What? My words were clear. You are certifiably insane. I am pragmatic. He tilts his head, his expression detached. You are failing, Miss Lane. School loans, exhausted lines of credit, your mother's health care costs. You are 90 days in arrears on your lease, facing eviction next week. You hold 2 jobs, and yet you are submerged. A chilling emptiness forms inside her. How could you know that? I know all things. That is unsettling. It is comprehensive. He steps toward her. Avery recoils. He halts, his face unreadable. I require a wife. You require rescue. It is merely a transaction. Why? Her voice is a fragile thing. For what reason does someone like you need a wife? You possess, she gestures vaguely. You have wealth and influence. What value could I offer? My family imposes specific expectations. His speech is terse. My grandfather forged an empire. His health is failing. He desires to see me established, conventional. I lack the time for emotional entanglement. I have no desire for an inquisitive or emotional spouse. You are convenient, you are in crisis, and legally you are presently mine. I am no one's property. Then you are free to depart. He retrieves his phone and presents the screen to her. This is the consequence of leaving. On the screen is her entire financial ruin. Account summaries, overdue notices, collections warnings. The digital blueprint of her collapse, a profound and intimate violation. And it is all accurate. You cannot do this. Avery breathes. I am doing nothing. I am offering you an option. That is not an option. It is coercion. Define it as you wish. He pockets the device. You have 10 seconds to decide. 10 seconds, I operate on a strict timetable. You are a fiend. 8 seconds. Avery rises, loathing her impotence, loathing this man who has vivisected her existence and now exploits every vulnerability. And my refusal? She asks, defiant. Then you may depart. A vehicle is prepared to return you home. The annulment will be processed before 5 p.m. Our paths will not cross again. And my acceptance? You become Mrs. Vascari for a term of 6 months. You will reside here. You will accompany me to social and business functions at my discretion. You will pose no questions. You will raise no objections. You will obey my directives implicitly. At the conclusion, you will depart, wealthy and unencumbered. That is prostitution. No, Damien replies, his tone glacial. That is the definition of marriage. Yet spectral notifications resonate in her mind. Delinquent, final notice, eviction order. The care facility's reminders of her mother's debt. Her school supervisor's caution about job security. She visualizes her small flat, its water-stained ceiling, the failed heating. She imagines consuming instant ramen again, as proper meals are unaffordable. She sees her mother's distant gaze, her cognition fading for want of care that Avery cannot finance. "Why me?" she inquires softly. "A matter of circumstance. We were both intoxicated. You consented. This reality makes you valuable. I detest you. You lack the knowledge for that. I have sufficient knowledge." Damien consults his timepiece. "Your time is up. What have you decided?" Avery's gaze falls to the ring. It fractures light into a multitude of colors across the floor, mirroring a fissure opening within her soul. The breach is just wide enough for her desperation to pour in. 6 months, she states, her tone empty. 6 months and I am released. You will be released. Raising her head, she meets his gaze and nods once. Very well, I accept. A subtle change finally registers on his face. It was not a smile, but perhaps the ghost of satisfaction. Excellent. We will begin at once. 2 hours later, the contract is presented. Avery sits in the designated east sitting room, a frigid chamber filled with ungainly furniture and excessive art, facing a sheaf of documents. The attorney, a woman in her 50s with hair in a silver chignon and a bored expression, deposited them before her. "Examine this thoroughly," she instructed. "Place your initials on every page." "I lack representation." "It is not required. The terms are unequivocally lucid." But terms were seldom lucid. A slight smile touched the attorney's mouth. "A sharper mind than you project." A potential accolade. Avery's eyes moved over the pages. The labyrinth of legal jargon induced a headache, yet the stipulations were starkly transparent. 6 months of mandated public engagements. No disloyalty. Clause 7B was heavily underscored. No unsanctioned press contact. No fraternizing with Damien's associates beyond formal events. The compensation, immediate debt, absolution, a $10,000 monthly stipend, and a terminal payment of $500,000. "This is completely mad," Avery murmured. "It is ironclad," the lawyer replied. "Mr. Viscari operates on a principle of totality, a fact Avery was beginning to internalize. The contract laid before her was not a mere agreement, but a codex for a new existence. She was to have a designated room, yet occupy Damien's when the family convened. A clear demarcation of her public versus private subjugation. Her very image was subject to command. A stylist, a shopper, all tools to sculpt the required persona. Then came the penalty clause, a financial guillotine. If she deviated, the debt would be double his expenditure, plus legal fees. "And if he transgressed?" Avery queried. "He won't, but hypothetically?" The attorney's expression was chiseled from granite. "He will not." Avery's gaze fell to the signature line, her hand quivering anew. This was the precipice. The moment her name was inscribed, Avery Lane, the indebted educator, would cease to be, replaced by Avery Viscari, the wife of a stranger in a world she could not possibly fathom. A vision of her mother surfaced. The crushing weight of debt, the specter of homelessness, the brutal truth of a system that penalizes poverty. She inscribed her name. The lawyer collected the pages in silence, secured them within a briefcase, and stood. "A pleasure to welcome you to the family, Mrs. Viscari. That isn't amusing. I was not attempting humor." Damien materialized at noon, his suit jacket absent. Clad in a simple white shirt and slacks, he almost resembled a normal man, but the permafrost in his gaze remained. "Your effects are being moved," he announced without inflection. "My assistant has the specifics." You have a single week to retrieve personal items from your former residence. You're evicting me. Your residence is here now. I never consented to this." He raised a solitary eyebrow. "You affixed your name to the contract. I signed it 5 minutes ago. Then allow me to offer an official welcome to your new home." He consulted his timepiece, a gesture becoming all too familiar. "We are dining with my family this evening, 7 o'clock precisely. Select something appropriate." "I own nothing appropriate for your type of family dinner. You will soon." "The stylist arrives in 20 minutes. Avery rose, the migraine roaring back. "Can you for one moment pause and acknowledge how fundamentally distorted this is?" "No." "Why would I? Acknowledgement alters nothing. You made your choice. I made mine. We are both ensnared by them." "You chose nothing," she retorted. "You orchestrated a hostile takeover. It is functionally the same. It is not remotely the same." Damien observed her for a long, silent interval, and Avery felt herself collapsing under the gravity of his stare. It lacked cruelty. It was simply vacant, the look of someone assessing an object before positioning it. "My family is complex," he said at last. "They will probe for weakness, offer nothing, hold no opinions, merely smile, nod, and permit me to speak, so I am to be a prop. You are my wife." The same thing. This time, a muscle near his mouth flickered. Not a smile, but within its geographic vicinity. "You learn quickly." The stylist was a diminutive woman named Simone, a font of nonstop chatter and unyielding opinions. She appraised Avery with a single look and exhaled as if Avery's very being was a personal insult. "We face a monumental task," Simone declared. "What is so deficient about me? How much time do you have?" Avery was then subjected to 2 hours of what Simone termed critical intervention: hair, makeup, wardrobe. At its conclusion, Avery failed to recognize the woman in the mirror. The reflection was poised, elegant, and radiated immense expense. She wore a black gown, worth more than her former car, heels that ignited her legs, and jewels that hummed with a deep, monetary power. "An improvement," Simone assessed, circling her like a predator. "Not perfect, but an improvement." "Thank you." "Naturally. Now for your posture. Erect, no slouching. You are the wife of Damien Viscari, not some mid-tier finance professional. And the difference is approximately $40 million and a significantly elevated threat level." Avery became motionless. "Threat level?" Simone dismissed the inquiry with a wave. "That falls outside my purview. Now, walk. My walk is adequate. Your walk is forgettable. We require an aura of regality. I am an educator, not royalty. You are a Viscari now." The same thing. By 7 p.m., Avery stood in the marble foyer of Damien's residence, draped in a fortune and feeling like a fraud. Her hands betrayed her with their restlessness. Damien emerged at the top of the grand staircase, once again in a full suit, his movements possessing a practiced grace that implied a lifetime of formality. "Are you prepared?" he inquired. "No." "Excellent. Let us depart." The vehicle was a black Mercedes with supple leather and a driver who functioned in complete silence. Damien was a solid mass beside her, his features lit at the cool glow of his phone, while Avery watched the Las Vegas Strip dissolve into a blur of light beyond the tinted window. From within the car's quiet luxury, the city seemed a faraway spectacle, a life to which she no longer had access. "Where are we headed?" she asked into the quiet. "My grandfather's estate." "How many gilded prisons does this family possess?" 3 in Nevada, 2 in California, and 1 in Italy. Of course you do, she mused internally. He finally tilted his head in her direction. Nervous? He asked. Terrified would be more accurate. Do not be. They are only people. The falsehood tasted like ash in her mouth. The wealthy are never only people. A small muscle in Damien's jaw tightened. You may have a point. The estate validated her assertion. A vast Mediterranean villa in Summerland, complete with gates, guards, and a staff that likely outnumbered her former high school. The driveway was a procession of elite automobiles, Bentleys, Maseratis, and a Rolls-Royce that looked like a museum piece. Damien's driver proceeded to the front, where a valet appeared to open Avery's door. "Showtime," Damien murmured. He exited before offering a hand to her. His touch was warm, his grip firm, and as her heel caught in the doorframe, he stabilized her without remark. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked, and Avery perceived a shift within his. It was not warmth, but neither was it ice. "Stay close," he said, his voice low, "and recall that you are utterly in love with me. I don't even know you. They do not need to." The massive doors opened before they arrived, revealing a woman in her 60s, with eyes that could fracture glass and equally sharp features. She wore diamonds as if they were armor, and her stare swept over Avery, leaving her feeling thoroughly appraised. "Damien," the woman stated, "you've made us wait." "Traffic?" "There is no traffic in Summerland. In that case, I am merely tardy." The woman's attention snapped to Avery. "And this," Damien announced, "is my wife." His hand settled on the small of Avery's back, a possessive, casual gesture that felt like a brand. "Avery, this is my aunt, Gabriella Viscari." "Charmed," Gabriella stated, her tone conveying the precise opposite. "How very abrupt." "Life is often unpredictable," Damien countered without pause. As they proceeded inside, Avery's breath caught. The opulence here rendered Damien's home. Modest, frescoed ceilings, marble columns, priceless art, and an assembly of people, a great many people. Every head turned as Damien escorted her toward what appeared to be an immense dining hall. "Everyone!" Damien's voice cut through the room with a chilling authority. "I would like you to meet Avery, my wife." A profound and immediate silence descended upon the assembly. Then from the head of the table, a voice like gravel and whiskey shattered the quiet. "Well," the old man grunted, "it's about damn time." The dinner that followed was an exercise in pure survival. Positioned at Damien's right, Avery felt the crushing weight of their scrutiny, each glance a silent judgment. The patriarch, Damien's grandfather Lorenzo, presided over the affair like a monarch, his inquiries like surgical tools masked as pleasantries. "So, tell me how you two came to meet," Lorenzo inquired, his steak knife moving with unnerving precision. "A charity gala," Damien replied, his voice impeccably smooth. "Avery was coordinating the event. I was in a terrible mood. She made me laugh." Further down the table, a low voice remarked, "I was not aware you knew how." The comment came from a cousin, a man with slicked back hair and a sneer that made Avery's skin crawl. "I am full of surprises," Damien replied, his tone dangerously level. "And you, Avery?" Lorenzo's pale eyes focused on her. "How do you occupy your time?" "I teach English at a public high school." "A teacher?" He uttered the word as if it were an admission of a felony. "How quaint!" "I enjoy it," Avery stated, her own voice firm. "The students are good children for the most part." "And now you shall be joining the family business, I presume." "The family business?" Construction, Damien interjected, his tone sharp. The interrogation was a collaborative effort, with the patriarch, Lorenzo, casting doubt on her academic background in a world of predators. The entire clan participated in the dissection. Aunt Gabriella's questions were clinical, while Cousin Marco made cutting remarks about their Las Vegas nuptials. Throughout this ordeal, Avery was so besieged by anxiety she could not eat, as Lorenzo watched her, his expression unreadable. Then, with the final course served, he delivered the critical blow. "So, explain to me why you consented to marry my grandson, Damin." He presented the unvarnished truth. Damin was a ruthless man, and she was to explain what qualified her to be his wife. A hush fell across the table as all eyes fixed upon her. In that moment, Damin placed a hand on her knee, beneath the table, a gesture of ambiguous intent. Was it support or a warning? Avery's gaze shifted between the two men before she delivered her reply. "I said yes because he asked," she stated, adding, "and I believe every person deserves to be more than what they seem." After a moment of profound tension, Lorenzo erupted in laughter. "This one has spirit," he pronounced. "Do not dare to extinguish it, Damien." To which Damien simply replied, "I will endeavor not to." Within the car's stark privacy, Avery's manufactured smile finally collapses, leaving behind tremors of sustained artifice. Damin, a stoic presence beside her, breaks the quiet with a clinical appraisal. "You handled yourself well." When she confesses to feeling nauseous, he merely notes her successful concealment. His questions about her family's intensity are confirmed with a chilling brevity. Then, a fissure appears in his composure as he admits she achieved the impossible by winning their approval, only to reveal the true engine of this entire arrangement. His grandfather has stage 4 cancer with a prognosis of 6 months. Damin then reveals the full transactional nature of their union. Lorenzo desires to see him settled before his inevitable death. This is the marriage's sole purpose, positioning Avery as a crucial component in a dynastic endgame. The cold reality of her role settles upon her. Her reflexive apology is deflected with a remark on his grandfather's many brushes with death in his line of work. Her inquiry into that work is met with the silent, window-ward gaze, a clear boundary. At his estate, she is shown to a lavish, isolated room. "Rest up," he instructs. "Tomorrow you start prepping for the next event." The event is a public art gallery opening, a media crucible where her performance must be flawless. "Then you better learn to fake it," he advises, turning away. Yet Avery's call halts him. She demands to know the true catalyst for their union. In a rare moment of vulnerability, his mask of control slips. "You said you wanted to vanish," he explains, his voice low. "You were tired of being invisible, so I made you seen." She reframes his action as entrapment. He defines it as offering an alternative. When she insists the two are not the same, he concedes with stark finality. "No, it is not." He then withdraws, leaving Avery alone in her newly visible, gilded cage. The wedding ring on her finger feels less like a symbol and more like a shackle. Her phone, now inert, confirms her total isolation. She is a prisoner in this opulent mansion, cast in a role she never sought. The identity of Avery Lane has been surgically removed, replaced by the unfamiliar construct of Mrs. Viscari. With the gallery event looming in just 3 days, she is utterly unmoored. The next morning, a meticulously color-coded schedule materializes. The script for her new life: 8 o'clock, breakfast with Damin, 9. A wardrobe fitting. 11. Media training. Following a 30-minute lunch, a 2 o'clock class on proper carriage awaits. A lesson in anachronistic poise. The bathroom alone eclipses her former apartment, while the closet now overflows with designer clothes, their price tags intact, artifacts of a life being systematically erased. In the dining hall, Daman is already present, his attention fixed upon a tablet, a cup of black coffee his only companion. He offers a glance that feels like a financial audit. "You're on time," he notes. "Good." Her caustic reply, "Yeah, I know how to read a clock," is immediately rebuffed. That sarcasm won't help you on Friday night. Avery counters the bleak truth that nothing about Friday night will help. As a staff member refills her coffee, her simple thank you is swiftly vetoed by Daman, who, without looking up, states, "You don't need to thank the staff." "Why the hell not?" she demands. "They're paid for their service." "They're also human beings," she insists. His eyebrow arches, a silent critique of her naivete. "You're going to have a hard time adjusting." "To being a jerk?" she retorts. "To being practical," he clarifies, finally setting down his tablet. "This gallery event is huge." He explains the high stakes: family, powerful associates, cameras, and reporters. "Everything you do reflects on me." Her sarcasm about the pressure is met with his grave seriousness, forcing her to admit her profound unpreparedness for such a performance. "That's why you have 3 days to learn," he states with cold finality. Her media coach, Richard, arrives in a cloud of cologne and caffeine-fueled energy. "Rule number 1, he proclaims. "You never, ever say no comment. It makes you look guilty." When she asks of what, he dismisses the question as irrelevant. All that matters are optics. The correct technique is to pivot to an approved talking point, which he provides on a laminated card filled with generic, soulless phrases for her to memorize. "These sound like a corporate press release," she observes. "This is how you don't drown," Richard counters, launching into a practice drill. He thrusts an imaginary microphone toward her. "Mrs. Viscari, how does it feel to marry into one of Vegas's most powerful families?" Avery's hesitation is branded a fatal flaw. A pause means you're hiding something again. Her next attempt, a weak "It's lovely," elicits a groan of theatrical despair. "Lovely. She says it's lovely. We are absolutely screwed." For 2 grueling hours, they rehearsed until Avery could recite the lines by rote, feeling like an absolute imposter. This was followed by lessons in posture from Celeste, a woman who seemed personally offended by Avery's very being. Celeste made her walk with a book on her head, issuing commands to correct her posture. Avery's explanation that she is a teacher accustomed to slouching is dismissed. "You are Mrs. Viscari now." The book fell for the 5th time, and Celeste sighed with the weight of a failing mission. That evening, Daman finds her in the library, awash in flashcards and stale coffee, attempting to absorb a family tree that resembles an organized crime chart. "Still at it," he observes. Her confusion over a thrice-married cousin prompts a rare, faint smile. "You're not wrong," he admits, acknowledging the diagram's chaos. He sits, loosens his tie, and for a moment she witnesses a weariness in him that no amount of money could ever cure. Avery seizes the moment to ask a question, to which he wryly replies, "You already did?" "So, real talk for a sec," she ventures. "What's with the hate?" "For who?" he asks. "Your fam. You talk about them like a hostile takeover." The accusation that his life is a performance hangs in the ensuing heavy silence. His fingers tap restlessly, the first visible fissure in his icy facade. Not hate, he finally clarifies, zero trust. That's way worse, she observes. Maybe, he concedes before rising to leave. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna be a whole other level of fake. He was correct. The next day was the 3-hour production of staged romance for the cameras. Avery felt certain Daman had never set foot in the kitchen where they were meant to look cozy. The photographer's constant refrain, "Just be natural," was the ultimate irony. Directed to look at Daman with adoration, all Avery could see was the man who owned her. Next 6 months. "You're lost in your head," Daman murmured for her ears only. "It's the only real estate I own," she shot back. "Then find a nicer neighborhood," he advised. But her mind could only summon a slideshow of her life's hardships, unpaid bills, and her mother's vacant stare. Happiness was a foreign concept, a destination depicted only on postcards. "I can't," she breathed out. For an instant, something shifted in Daman, a flicker of humanity in his eyes. His hand covered hers, its touch uncharacteristically warm. "Then just hang on," he whispered. "That's the entire job." The camera's shutter captured the moment, which the photographer hailed as gold. That night, adrift in her massive bed, Avery listened to the muffled sounds of Daman's separate existence down the hall until the house fell into an unnerving silence. She began to question if he was even capable of feeling, or if she was simply a transaction on a balance sheet. Her phone suddenly vibrated with a text from an unknown number. A summons to the east sitting room for the following morning, alone. Her cautious inquiry about the sender's identity received an immediate, clear response. "Gabriella, we need to talk." The next day, Gabriella Vescari was already there, positioned in an armchair as if it were the Iron Throne, exuding an aura of regal and intimidating power. "Sit," Gabriella commanded. It was not a request. "Coffee? I'm good, thanks." "Smart girl, caffeine is for the weak-willed," Gabriella opined, before hypocritically taking a sip of her own. Her gaze was a physical force. "All right, let's cut the crap. This marriage is a complete sham." Ice solidified in Avery's stomach. Her attempt at a denial was swiftly cut down. "I've been navigating this snake pit for 40 years. I know a real marriage when I see one, and this ain't it." Gabriella leaned forward, her voice low. "So let's get to it. What's your endgame?" "A non-disclosure agreement binds me." "And agreements are merely paper. The right pressure shatters anything." Avery's hands coiled into tight fists on her lap. "Listen, I'm not here to shatter things. I just need to endure the coming 6 months." 6 months? Gabriella's eyes glinted, the unmistakable look of a predator locking onto a weakness. "Such a precise term. It must be a contract." "That was never stated." "It was broadcast by your terror." The matriarch leaned back, her gaze seeming to penetrate flesh and bone. "You have more cunning than you let on. I'll grant you that. Damien requires it. His last little dalliance had the charisma of a damp cloth. There was a predecessor. A few. They failed to pass inspection." She took a sip of her coffee. "But you are a new archetype." "How so?" "You're paralyzed with genuine fear. The others merely feigned it. Your status as an outsider is obvious, and you lack the artifice to conceal it. That suggests either immense courage or profound foolishness. I'm wagering on foolishness." For the first time, a genuine smile touched Gabriella's lips. Not one of warmth, but of intrigued appraisal. "Against my better judgment, I'm invested, so here's a piece of unsolicited wisdom. Simply survive the first month. And the pressure lessens after that. Whose pressure? All of it. Gabriella rose, smoothing her silk skirt. Oh, and Avery, erase every preconceived notion you have of us. It is all a performance. We are a family built of specters and reflections, every single one. With that, she departed, leaving Avery's heart hammering against the sudden, oppressive silence. The message, however cryptic, had been delivered with absolute clarity. She hadn't entered a business deal. She had stepped into a labyrinth, one constructed of invisible, lethal barriers. The gallery event descended on her like a physical blow. Simone had spent 4 hours sculpting her into a red carpet paragon. The dress was the color of a starless night, with a slit that provoked a steady, low-level panic. Her hair, her makeup. The woman in the reflection was an utter stranger. You are now a corporate asset, Simone said with a satisfied nod. That is the entire objective. Then Damien arrived, and for the first time, he was brought to a complete halt. His eyes conducted a full assessment, and the stoic mask he habitually wore showed a definite fracture. You appear, he began, his voice fading. Like an asset, Avery supplied for him. I was aiming for breathtaking, but that description is also accurate. The gallery was a gentrified warehouse in the heart of Vegas, remade into a minimalist shrine to modern art. As they arrived, a phalanx of paparazzi descended upon them, a violent onslaught of flashbulbs and shouted questions. All right, pay attention, Damien instructed as the vehicle stopped. Smile, wave, and remain silent. I will manage this horde. What if they direct a question at me? Evade it. You receive 2 hours of coaching for this exact scenario. The door opened onto unadulterated chaos. Damien exited first, then reached back for her. His hand was a vice on hers as she plunged into the tempest of light and sound. Mr. Viscari, look this way. Who is the new woman? Are the wedding rumors founded? Damien's arm encircled her waist, pulling her flush against his body. To the public, it was the pose of a power couple. To Avery, it felt like cold, methodical subjugation. Smile, he breathed into her ear, and so she smiled. She affixed one to her face until her muscles ached, waving to no one in particular, allowing Damien to carve a path through the media into the sanctuary of the building. The interior was merely a more civilized battlefield, filled with beautiful combatants, endless libations, and art valued higher than a small nation. Do not, under any circumstances, leave my side, Damien ordered, a command Avery had no intention of defying. They enjoyed approximately 10 minutes of reprieve before a man intercepted them. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the vacant eyes of a shark, an apex predator. Damien, the man purred, his voice slick with false camaraderie. I heard you took the plunge, Victor. Damien's tone dropped by 20 degrees. This is my wife, Avery. Avery, Victor Castellano, the shark who held dominion over half the city. Only half, Victor smirked, his focus fixated on Avery. The photographs failed to capture your essence, so tell me, how did you finally ensnare the greatest prize in Vegas? I didn't ensnare him, Avery countered, adhering to her script. We were fortunate enough to find one another. How very lyrical. Victor's smile was composed entirely of teeth. So, what is your history, Avery? I'm an educator. How virtuous, he commented, as if she had just admitted to a terminal condition. I'm certain Damien can arrange more suitable employment for you now. Teaching is suitable employment, Avery retorted, startled by her own audacity. It has significance. Of course, of course. Victor redirected his attention to Damien. We must discuss the Henderson acquisition. This is not the time, Victor. The deadline approaches. With you, it always is. Damien's hold on her intensified. My office. Tomorrow. Victor's synthetic smile vanished. Tomorrow, he offered Avery a curt nod. A pleasure, Mrs. Vicari. The moment he departed, Avery could finally exhale. I find that man utterly detestable. Welcome to the consensus, but he is a necessary evil. For what purpose? Commerce. Damien steered her toward a less congested area. You handled that well. My instinct was to strike him. Mine also. But that is not how the game is played. Then what are the rules? Before he could elaborate, Lorenzo simply materialized. The old Don moved with the aid of a cane, yet the crowd parted for him as if for a prophet. Grandfather, Damien said, his voice devoid of all emotion. You've brought the girl? Lorenzo's clouded gaze settled on Avery. Good. Let me appraise your purchase. Avery held her ground as he evaluated her like livestock at auction. But she met his stare without flinching, refusing to break contact. She will suffice, Lorenzo pronounced after a weighty silence. There's a fire in her. Good. Damen requires a wife who will not fracture. I am not some animal, Avery snapped, the words escaping before she could restrain them. A coarse laugh rumbled deep in Lorenzo's chest, the same sound she recalled from dinner. No, that much is clear. Now accompany me. We will allow Damen to attend to his matters. The statement was an undeniable command. As Lorenzo started to move, Avery was compelled to follow, the intensity of Damen's gaze burning into her back. The old patriarch guided her to a quieter section of the gallery, among alcoves where abstract canvases were consumed by heavy shadows. Do you understand art? Lorenzo grunted. Somewhat. My degree is in literature, not art history. Excellent. Those who profess to understand art are typically imposters. He stopped in front of a canvas that was nothing but vibrant fury. Describe what you perceive. Avery studied it intently. It depicts chaos with a purpose, rage directed at a singular target. Precisely. Lorenzo's cane tapped against the marble floor. That is my grandson. A tempest under absolute control. He has been this way since he was a boy. Do you know why? No. Because his father was executed when he was 8 years old. It was reported as a vehicle collision, but it was no accident. It was a message delivered by a rival family. Lorenzo's voice was frigid and detached. And Damen was the one who discovered him. A sharp gasp caught in Avery's throat. That is barbaric. It is, but that is the crucible that forged the man he is today. Driven, lethal, and utterly devoid of mercy when necessary. Lorenzo turned, his eyes boring into hers. I share this with you so you comprehend the world you have now entered. This family does not adhere to conventional laws. We cannot afford that luxury. So what laws do you follow? Our own. His eyes swept over her face. Does this reality disturb you? Should it? It should, but I sense you are not easily frightened. I observed your interaction with Gabriella. He was aware of that? She tells me everything. A faint smile touched Lorenzo's lips. She has developed a fondness for you. That is unprecedented. Gabriella despises everyone. I perceived that. Here's some unsolicited guidance, child. The next 6 months will be an ordeal by fire. My family will assess you, they will probe you, they will search for your vulnerabilities. A few may even attempt to destroy you, simply to test your breaking point. You cannot permit it. How can I possibly prevent them? By remembering that you are a Viscari now? That name is both your armor and your blade. Wield it. He resumed walking, Avery following in his wake, her thoughts a whirlwind. Each of Lorenzo's statements was simultaneously a threat and an initiation. When they returned to the main hall, Daman was in a tense conference with men in expensive suits. His head snapped up as they approached, and an entire silent narrative unfolded between him and his grandfather in a single glance. I am exhausted, Lorenzo declared. Take me home. I can summon Marco. Not Marco, you two. The journey to Lorenzo's estate was shrouded in a heavy silence. The old Don sat at the passenger seat. Daman drove, and Avery occupied the back, watching the lights of Vegas blur into streaks against the window. Upon their arrival, Lorenzo remained in the vehicle. Daman, he said, a private word. Avery exited without prompting, standing beside the car as the two men spoke in low, urgent tones. She could not discern the words, but Lorenzo's hands gestured emphatically while Daman stood motionless, absorbing it all with his inscrutable expression. Finally, Lorenzo emerged and paused beside Avery. You will be present for dinner on Sunday. It was a directive? Yes, sir. Good. And Avery, place your trust in no one, not even him. He gestured with his head toward Daman. Especially not him. Then he was gone, swallowed by the mansion, leaving Avery with a chill that was unrelated to the evening air. Daman reappeared at her side. What were his words to you? Daman's voice was taut, a wire pulled to its breaking point. Inconsequential, it meant nothing. He is a prisoner of his own delusions. The medication only amplifies it. He presented as entirely lucid to me. To this, Daman offered no rebuttal. Inside the vehicle, the journey homeward was saturated with the weight of unspoken truths. Upon returning to the state, Avery retreated directly toward her chambers, feeling profoundly depleted. Her motion halted, hand hovering over the handle as Damon's voice broke the stillness. You performed well this evening, she turned. He stood in the frame of his own doorway, divested of his jacket, his tie loosened. In that brief instant, he appeared unguarded, almost fragile. Your grandfather disclosed the events concerning your father, Avery stated gently. A flicker of deep-seated pain crossed Damon's features. That was a breach of confidence. He wished for me to comprehend you. There is nothing to comprehend. That was a different existence. You were merely a child. I am no longer a child. He withdrew into the solitude of his room. Good night, Avery. The sound of the lock clicking was a definitive barrier. Entering her own room, she secured the bolt and collapsed onto the bed. Her phone illuminated with a message from an unlisted number. Welcome to the family. Be vigilant. She gazed at the screen for a protracted moment before erasing the text. Yet the words lingered, an incorporeal whisper in the darkness. That nameless menace loomed for days, followed only by an unnerving quietude, far more ominous than any message. Her existence settled into a peculiar rhythm. Mornings were marked by strained coffee rituals with Daman, where they sat like strategists negotiating a truce. Her afternoons were allocated to Simone, absorbing the nuances of posture, speech, and presence befitting Mrs. Viscari. The evenings coalesced into a ceaseless parade of philanthropic galas and family meals, where every expression of warmth was a practiced deception. Beneath this veneer lay the immense strain of the grand artifice, the pretense of belonging, the simulation of affection for this man, and the charade that this was anything more than a contract with an expiration date. Yet around the third week, a subtle transformation began. It was almost imperceptible at first. Damen started to solicit her judgment on minor details. The choice of a tie, whether the caterers should feature salmon or chicken, or if the Picasso was better suited than the Rothko for the East Hall. These were trivial matters, decisions of no real consequence, except they felt significant when he consistently implemented her suggestions. Then came the morning she descended the stairs to find her preferred coffee prepared. Not the expensive blend Damen favored, but the inexpensive vanilla creamer she had mentioned in passing weeks prior, a small emblem of the life she had abandoned. "What is the origin of this?" she inquired. Fixated on the bottle? Damen remained engrossed in his phone. "The kitchen." "I never requested it from the kitchen." "I did." "For what reason?" "You indicated a preference for it." "I mentioned it once. Once was sufficient." His gaze finally met hers, and it held a different quality, a new warmth. "Cease your interrogation of the coffee, Avery. Simply consume it." And so she did. It was a flavor from her past, from a period that was simultaneously simpler and far more difficult, but a time that was unequivocally her own. The Sunday dinners at Lorenzo's residence became a recurring ordeal. The assembly was unchanging, as were the veiled inquiries disguised as polite discourse, and the pervasive sense of being evaluated and dismissed. Marco, the cousin with the slicked-back hair and an avaricious gaze, consistently made it a point to isolate her when Damen was occupied. So, Marco insinuated himself into her space one evening, cornering her by the bar as Damen conversed with an uncle Avery could not identify. "How does the married state agree with you?" "It is satisfactory," Avery replied, her tone neutral. "Merely satisfactory? That sounds remarkably dull." "I am remarkably dull." "For some reason, I find that difficult to believe." Marco encroached further, his costly cologne unable to conceal the scent of whiskey. "I suspect you are merely fulfilling a role. We all are. The pertinent question is, what is your ultimate objective? I have none. Everyone desires something. Wealth, security, a sample of this life before you disappear. I desire that you retreat." Marco chuckled, unmoved. "You possess a certain sharpness. I appreciate that. Damen was always drawn to the complicated types." "What is the implication of that statement?" "It implies you are not the first woman who believed she could tame him, but you may be the first one who—" "Marco." Damen's voice cut through the ambient conversation like a blade. He materialized at Avery's side, his expression an impassive mask. "Depart." "Hey, we were merely talking." "No, you are encroaching upon my wife. There is a significant distinction." Marco's smug expression finally faltered. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "Easy, cousin, just being amicable." "Be amicable elsewhere." As Marco retreated, Avery released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Damen's hand rested on the small of her back, a gesture that felt like both protection and possession. "Are you all right?" he inquired in a low voice. "I can manage Marco." "I am aware you can, but you should not be required to." He steered her from the bar toward the more subdued dining room. "The man is a fool. Grant him no consideration." "He said I was not the first." "You are not." The unvarnished honesty of his admission stung more than she anticipated. "How many others have there been?" Does it alter the circumstances? Perhaps. Damon ceased walking. They stood alone in the corridor, insulated from the noise, as he turned to face her. 3. Over the preceding 5 years, all were arrangements identical to ours. None endured beyond a few months. What became of them? They desired something from me that I was unable to give. What did they desire? Me. He uttered the word with stark simplicity, as if it were the most self-evident answer. The authentic version of me, not the agreement, not the performance. They wanted a man I do not know how to be. Avery searched his eyes for any sign of falsehood. She found only a severe, unsettling truth. And I? You are different. How? You do not want me. So, Avery's inclination to escape, he argues, paradoxically makes her less of a liability. For whom, one must ask. For both, is the implication. But before she can form a response, Gabriella emerges, announcing that the meal is served. The dinner is a study in controlled chaos. Lorenzo, the Don, recounts sanitized tales of the underworld, while Gabriella observes the table with unconcealed suspicion. Marco broods, Damon's relatives exchange veiled insults, and Avery. She offers a placid smile, realizing with a creeping dread that she is internalizing the protocols of their perilous game. Following the meal, Lorenzo summons Damon for their customary private conference. It is a Sunday ritual that consistently leaves Damon clenched and taciturn for the entire drive home. Avery never pries, for who would want access to that knowledge? Tonight, however, Damon breaks the pattern of silence. He wants us to relocate to the main residence. Avery's head snaps toward him. What? Apparently, her grandfather-in-law deems it traditional for the heir to reside within the family compound. You are the heir? She asks, utterly astonished. I am the eldest grandson. That is the system. And what was your reply? I informed him no, delivered with absolute finality. Damon disables the ignition but remains stationary. I do not want you living there. It is already a challenge to ensure your safety here. That single word resonates in the space between them. Safe. Not content, not well. Safe. Am I in danger? Avery asks, her voice barely a whisper. Damon's jaw tightens. No. You are being dishonest. I am being cautious. Those are not synonymous, Damon. Just let it go, Avery. He exits the car, terminating the discussion. But Avery cannot let it go. That night, she undertakes the one action she has postponed for weeks. She searches for Damien Viscari online. Beneath the polished corporate image, she uncovers deeply troubling speculations, innuendos and accusations, and one article from 5 years prior connecting the Viscari family to organized crime. The author employed cautious phrasing like alleged and rumored, but the depiction was stark. Money laundering, racketeering, and business adversaries who tended to vanish. Avery shuts the laptop, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. She had sensed it, the illicit nature of this family. It was in Lorenzo's threats, Gabriella's cryptic remarks, and the fear that masqueraded as respect among the staff. But to see it in print rendered it terrifyingly concrete. She had entered into a union with a criminal or a syndicate prince, whatever title fit the gray space he occupied. Her phone vibrates, the unknown number again. Do you still believe you are safe? Her hand trembles as she types. Who is this? No response follows. She waits for 10 minutes, then 20, then a full hour. Only silence remains. A chilling silence, and the visceral understanding that she has entered something far more perilous than a counterfeit marriage. The following morning, Damon discovers her in the library, encircled by relics of her teaching career, lesson plans, graded essays, and a worn copy of The Great Gatsby. You feel its absence, he observes. It was not a question, but a declaration. With every passing day. You could return eventually. Truly? Is that possible? Avery meets his gaze directly. I have been absent nearly a month. They have already filled my position. I verified. Then I will teach at another institution. Where? What school would employ a Viscari for a single semester? They will assume I am a dilettante or conducting research, or that I took a leave of absence for a wedding, which is, in fact, what I did. Did you? Damen occupies an adjacent chair, appearing utterly drained. She was becoming adept at interpreting his signals, the rigidity in his shoulders, the hard set of his jaw, the subtle furrow between his brows. What have you discovered? He questions, his tone leaving no room for denial. Her confusion is a fragile defense. Last night you were researching me. The evidence is etched on your face. A chilling realization settles in Avery's core. How could you? I am the architect of this network. I observe every device within these walls. This is a flagrant violation of my privacy. It is a security measure. He closes the distance. Tell me what you found. Articles, accusations, whispers of your family's connection to organized crime, and I require the truth from you. Damen's silence stretches, becoming an answer in itself. When he speaks, his voice is a study in control. My grandfather constructed an empire. Portions of it were legitimate, others were not. By the time I understood its scope, the distinctions had already dissolved. That fails to answer my question. It is the only answer you will receive. Avery struggles to frame her next words. Are you involved in his enterprise? I manage the legitimate operations. Property, development, that entire portfolio. I maintain a deliberate distance from the other ventures. But you are aware of them. Awareness is not complicity. It is alarmingly close. Damen rises with such speed that Avery instinctively recoils. He registers her fear, and his composure shatters. I would never harm you. I never suggested you would. You withdrew from me. Your movement was incredibly sudden. I am not my family, Avery. I do not. He falters, raking a hand through his hair. It is the first time she has ever witnessed him appear so utterly adrift. I have dedicated my entire adult life to building something untainted, something that will not detonate when my grandfather passes and the vultures descend to fight over his legacy. This union, this absurd, fraudulent, temporary union, is a component of that strategy. It buys me time. It projects an image of stability. It is my leverage. So, I am merely an instrument. You are a resolution. The distinction is critical. Not from my perspective. They stood in opposition, a desk between them, as a searing anger began to swell within Avery. Fury at him for ensnaring her, at herself for consenting, and at the world for cornering her into this impossible choice. I want to terminate this arrangement, she declared, her voice low and steady. No, you do not. Yes, I do. Then depart. Damen's voice was like ice, his face a flawless, frigid mask. The exit is unlocked. You are free to leave. I will have the annulment documents drafted by sunrise, and my debts will remain. Those were the terms of our agreement. That is profoundly unfair. Indeed it is, but it is the reality. He moves toward the door before glancing back. You possess a choice, Avery. You have always possessed a choice. The pertinent question is whether you have the fortitude to bear the consequences. He abandoned her there, trembling with a volatile mixture of fury, terror, and an unidentifiable third emotion. She gazed at her copy of The Great Gatsby, at the symbolic green light on its cover, contemplating the pursuit of the unattainable. She pondered desire, acquisition, and loss. Ultimately, she did not depart. That evening, she enters his study as he examines what appear to be documents of great importance. He raises his head at her arrival. "I am staying," Avery announces. "I am aware. But I require complete transparency from you. No more unforeseen events, no more secrets." "That is not a stipulation of this arrangement." "Then let us amend the arrangement." Damon places his pen down. "You are proposing that I trust you." "I am proposing that you treat me as a human being, not as a piece in your strategic game." He considers this for a moment. "What information do you require?" "Everything," Avery states, taking the seat opposite him. "Beginning with the identity of the person sending me menacing text messages." Damon's expression darkens. "Let me see." She retrieves her phone and passes it to him. He scans the messages, his features hardening into stone. "How long has this been occurring?" 3 weeks. It began shortly after the gallery event." "And it did not occur to you to inform me?" "I was uncertain if I could trust you." Confounded Avery. He gets to his feet, pacing the floor. "This is a serious matter. This is—" He stops himself, taking out his phone to place a call. "I require a trace on a number. Transmit the findings as soon as they are available." He dictates the digits from her phone and disconnects. "You will receive a new phone tomorrow and a security detail." "I will not have a security detail. You are not being given an option. Someone is threatening you, which implies they know of our arrangement, which implies—" He cuts himself off again. "I must manage this." "Manage it? How?" "That is not your concern. It is absolutely my concern if I am the one being targeted." Damon reduces the space between them, crouching to meet her gaze. His gray eyes were intense, bordering on fearsome. "You must understand something fundamental. The world I occupy is perilous. People perceive weakness as an invitation to attack. Being married to me transforms you into a target. I am capable of protecting you, but only if you permit it. By keeping me uninformed, by keeping you alive." The gravity of his statement settled in the room. Avery swallowed with difficulty. "Who would wish to harm me?" "Rivals, enemies, individuals who believe you are a simple path to me." He rose to his full stature. "I exercise caution. I maintain the privacy of our marriage, but it is clear someone has been observing us." She inquires, "Is your family responsible for this?" "No, they may despise you, but they would not engage in this. It is a line that is not crossed." "Then who is responsible?" "I do not have a name yet, but rest assured I will acquire one." The following day, the security personnel materialized. 2 men built like fortifications, flanking her door and shadowing Avery's every step. The atmosphere grew constricted, a persistent, suffocating sensation that declared her life was no longer her own. "This is functionally a prison," she tells Damon. "You're being protected." The experience feels identical. It is not remotely similar. The threats ceased, but Avery could not dispel the unsettling feeling of being perpetually watched. Every vehicle that followed too closely, every stranger whose gaze lingered at the market, every misshapen shadow. She felt pursued by phantoms, and she detested every moment. 2 weeks later, during Sunday dinner, Lorenzo collapses. It transpired in an instant. One moment he was recounting a story about a business deal from the 1970s. The next he was a slumped figure in his chair, his face ashen, his breathing shallow. The room erupted into chaos. Gabriella was screaming for an ambulance. Damin was already at his grandfather's side, searching for a pulse. Marco was shouting into his phone, and Avery was simply frozen, an observer witnessing the complete unraveling of the dynasty that now owned her. The ambulance arrives, and Lorenzo is spirited away to the hospital. The family follows in a procession of sleek black vehicles, leaving Avery isolated in a sterile waiting room surrounded by Viscaris whose facades had finally crumbled. Gabriella was sobbing without restraint. Marco was wearing a path into the floor. Damon was a statue near the window, his gaze vacant, his jaw clenched so tightly Avery feared it might fracture. She approached him with the caution one would use with a cornered animal. "Are you all right?" His reply was devoid of life. Absolute. "He is dying, but they said his condition is stable." "He is dying," Daman reiterated. "This is the start of the end. The physicians informed us months ago. His heart is failing. The cancer therapy consumed everything else. It is only a matter of time." "I am so sorry," she whispered. "Do not be. He outlived most men in our line of work. He was always aware of the cost." But that knowledge provides little comfort. Daman finally met her eyes, and for a fleeting second, his entire carefully constructed exterior cracked. She witnessed raw, undisguised terror. "When he is gone," he said, his words a dark prophecy, "everything will change." The family, the business, every alliance he maintained for 40 years, they will all implode. There will be a war for his throne, and you're the one expected to claim it. I am the one expected to try. And if you do not succeed, someone else will prevail, someone far, far worse. He turned back to the window. I just require him to hold on for 6 more months. Just 6, and this fraudulent marriage will have served its purpose, to establish them as legitimate, solidified, untouchable. But when she questioned if the old patriarch could endure for 6 months, Damon's reply was a profound silence. Lorenzo survived the night. He was transferred to intensive care, tethered to a symphony of machines that breathed for him. The family maintained a constant vigil, a rotation of pale-faced specters at his bedside. Avery found herself there at 3 a.m, the equipment sighing on his behalf while Daman was asleep in a chair. The old man's eyes fluttered open, disoriented in the haze. Then they found her. "You remain," he rasped. "Where else would I be?" "A clever girl." His hand gestured weakly, and she enclosed it in her own. His skin was as thin and cold as parchment. "Do you love him yet?" "What?" "Daman, do you love him?" A perfectly crafted falsehood firmed on her lips, one of the polished responses her father had instilled in her. But Lorenzo's gaze pierced through the pretense, and the truth simply emerged. "I do not know." A faint, grim smile touched Lorenzo's mouth, a mixture of agony and respect. "The only truthful answer. Love is not a thing you know. It is a thing you survive." His grip intensified. "You are what he requires. You are his humanity. Do not permit him to lose it after I am gone." "You are not going anywhere. We are all going somewhere, little one. The true question is whether the legacy we leave behind has any meaning." His eyes drifted closed. "Watch over him. He will need you." Lorenzo slipped away from consciousness, leaving Avery overwhelmed by the burden of a dying man's final command. Across the room, Damon stirred. He looked from his grandfather to her, and a silent understanding passed between them. A mutual surrender to the fact that the foundation of their world was disintegrating and they were powerless to prevent it. "Come here," Damon murmured. Avery went to him, and he pulled her onto his lap, his arm securing her as she finally allowed herself to depend on him. This was not a performance, not for any unseen cameras, but an embrace born from a desperate, primal need she felt for the first time in this entire manufactured nightmare. They remained that way until the encroaching dawn, when physicians declared Lorenzo's condition had stabilized. With the family's return, the charade resumed. Yet the current between Avery and Damon had irrevocably shifted. The meticulously drawn line separating their act from their reality had begun to dissolve. 3 weeks on, Lorenzo returned home, a mere specter of his former power, but breathing. The family shared a subdued meal, if the Viscaris were ever capable of true quiet. Avery no longer attempted to catalog the ceaseless stream of events. They had merged into a single, exhausting tableau of strained smiles and cautious dialogue, all enacted under the immense weight of scrutiny against a standard she could not comprehend. But since the hospital, Damon's touch was altered. It was a language unspoken to the world, but his hand would locate hers beneath the table. He would draw her nearer in a crowded space, his palm resting on her back with a sense of innate belonging. And deep in the night, she would hear the restless rhythm of his pacing from across the hall. Twice, on separate nights, she discovered him in her doorway, merely observing, as if verifying she hadn't dematerialized. "You are not required to do that," she had stated. "Do what?" "Maintain a vigil." "I am not maintaining a vigil. I am—" He searched for the right word. "Ascertaining your well-being." "I am fine." "You are never fine." "Neither am I, yet we both remain." The exchange held no trace of romance, nothing tender. It was, however, the unvarnished truth. And Avery was learning that with Damon, this brutal honesty was a currency more valuable than any precious metal. The morning their world finally fractured began with a deceptive calm. As Avery read in the library, she was truly reading, not feigning the act when Damon stormed into the room. His face was a pale mask, his jaw locked in a formation that signaled only disaster. "We must depart, immediately." Avery lowered her book. "What is it?" "In the vehicle. Collect your purse, Avery." "Now?" The command in his voice was a shard of pure ice. She gathered her things, following him to a black sport utility vehicle in the garage. This was not one of their customary transports. This vehicle's windows were so dark they served as a confession. "Get in the rear," Damon commanded, "and keep your head lowered." "What on earth is transpiring?" "Someone has sold photographs of us from before." Avery felt the warmth drain from her body. "What photographs?" "The chapel's surveillance cameras. You, intoxicated, barely lucid. Me, effectively supporting your weight. It appears—" He faltered. "It appears to be precisely what it was." "How severe is this?" "Sufficiently severe that it is now ubiquitous. Sufficiently severe that my own kin are demanding explanations I cannot provide." So severe that his phone began to vibrate. He cast it a lethal glance and silenced it. "Sufficiently severe that we must disappear until I can contain this." They drove for 2 hours, heading east into the desolate heart of the desert. Mason, her silent sentinel for weeks, offered only terse, coded replies into his phone. Daman was a Category 5 Tempest on his device, his voice a low, brutal instrument of command to soldiers she could not perceive. I am indifferent to their offers. No statement. Nothing. A pause. Then present a greater sum. Acquire every last print. I want them gone by this evening. Another extended silence. Because your failure means your termination. That is why. He ended the call only to initiate another. Where are we being taken? Avery whispered. A secure location, entirely off the grid. Known only to Mason and myself? And your family? They are especially to remain unaware. They arrived at a remote structure. It was not rustic. Daman did not engage with rustic, but it was utterly isolated. Solar panels and a generator could sustain it for weeks. Mason performed a perimeter check while Daman guided her inside. The interior was a single, stark room, a secure, sterile container that felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. How long are we to remain here? Avery inquired. For the duration required. Daman was already scanning news outlets on his phone, his expression darkening with each image he viewed. Allow me to see. No. Daman. It is my likeness. I possess a right to know. He held her gaze for a long, weighty second before surrendering the phone. I did warn you. The headlines constituted a public execution. Billionaire's intoxicated wedding farce, teacher in a gilded prison. The photos themselves were a hallucinatory nightmare. Her, adorned with a ridiculous napkin as a veil, her makeup smeared, being propped up by a man whose face was a blank in her memory. The images were grainy, yet their narrative was brutally, unmistakably clear. Clear enough to broadcast the squalid truth of it all. This is damaging, she breathed. It is a catastrophe. It introduces the one variable I could not permit. Doubt. It compels people to question the reality of this entire arrangement. It is not real. I am aware. You are aware. But the world cannot be. He retrieved his phone. And the world is now our audience. By morning, the media narrative will be merciless, opportunist, coercion, every possible accusation. His family will demand an accounting. Lorenzo will be enraged. Daman is descending into a spiral, his entire intricate design undone by a security guard seeking a payday. Prosecute them, she inquires. That is underway, but the narrative is already loose. The initial impact is irreversible. Avery sinks to the sofa, trembling, asking for the strategy. His plan? Go to ground and pray a larger scandal eclipses theirs. And if one does not, Daman moves to sit beside her, and for the first time, his gaze truly lands on her. Then we confront it. Together, she is stunned. I believed this to be a business arrangement. He concedes it began as such, but now the situation has become complicated. How complicated? She presses. He then reveals that in the past 3 months, she is transformed from a strategic convenience into something vital. Avery is shaken. He instantly qualifies the statement. Do not misinterpret this as a declaration of love. It is an objective fact. You are vital, and I protect my assets. That is all. But she counters. Is it? He evades, staring into the desert, merely noting that his man Mason is standing watch. We are secure here. No one will breach the perimeter. She responds, Do you believe they would actually make an attempt? He clarifies the stakes. When this level of capital is in play, people behave like predators, and our marriage has become a feeding ground. The remainder of the day passes in profound silence. He conducts business on the phone while she stares at a book, absorbing none of the words. Her mind is a closed loop, replaying the mortifying images, her desperate circumstances laid bare. The world now understands their union was founded on liquor and poor judgment, not affection. As dusk settles, Daman starts a fire and she finds herself moving toward its warmth. He approaches the sofa, offering her one of 2 glasses of whiskey. "I do not drink," she states, but he dismisses it. "You did on one occasion. Consider the outcome." She replies flatly, "That is not amusing." He smirks. "Slightly amusing." He extends the glass again. "You are not obligated to drink it, but the choice is available." She accepts it, observing the amber liquid. "I recall nothing of that night. Not one detail." Her voice fractures. "I have no memory of meeting you, or of consenting. I do not remember becoming this." "This what?" he asks, his tone uncharacteristically gentle. "Mrs. Viscari, the disaster in those pictures. The woman so desperate that a stranger's proposition seemed a viable option." He simply shakes his head. "You were not desperate. You were drowning." "What is the distinction?" Daman takes a large swallow of his drink. "I have made numerous flawed decisions in my life. Marrying you was not among them." She is incredulous. "Even with this detonating around us?" "Even now." He sets his glass down, his demeanor becoming serious. "Do you want to know the true motivation for my actions? You believed I required a cover story. That was the operating theory, yes, but not my reason." He turns to face her directly. "I proceeded because for the first time in my existence, someone looked at me and did not register the wealth, did not see the family legacy. They simply saw a man in a chapel at 3 a.m. who was as lost as they were. You perceived a human being, and I—" The words catch in his throat. I had to grasp onto that. Even if it was an illusion, just for a moment, I needed to be seen that way, for a little while longer. Avery feels a constriction in her chest. "Daman, But he interjects. "I am not seeking a response. I am merely providing the truth you requested, so it is yours." The only sound is the crackle of the fire. The foundation beneath Avery is shifting. The defenses she erected are beginning to fail. This cold, calculating man just presented her with a raw piece of his own soul, and she has no idea how to handle it. "I am afraid," she finally whispers. "Of what?" "Of this, of you, of what occurs when the 6 months conclude and I must revert to being anonymous." "You are not anonymous." "I was. Before you, I was invisible. I taught children who were indifferent, was submerged in debt, and observed my own mother's memory of me fade each week. I was sinking, just as you said, and now I am—" She gestures at their surroundings, unable to find the words. "I no longer recognize who I am." "You are Avery. That has not altered." "Everything has altered." Daman reaches for her, his movement slow, offering her time to retreat. She does not. His hand cups her jaw, his thumb tracing her cheek. "Not everything." She should have recoiled, should have reminded him of their temporary contract, but she did not. She inclined her head forward, and when he kissed her with profound care, she kissed him in return. It was not a cinematic climax. No orchestral score swelled, no tectonic plates shifted beneath them. It was the convergence of 2 performers so lost in their roles they had forgotten the nature of truth, now seeking it in one another. As they separated, his forehead met hers. "This is a profoundly flawed strategy." "Perhaps the most flawed," she conceded. "We should cease this." "We should," yet stasis held them captive. "I offer no guarantees," he stated, his voice a low frequency. No storybook conclusion. I cannot guarantee I won't inflict damage. It is not in my design. Then offer nothing, Avery countered. Simply exist with me. In this moment, that is sufficient. They remained there until the fire dwindled to a core of pulsing embers. His arm was a bulwark around her. Her head rested upon his chest. There was no discourse, no strategic maneuvering, only two individuals in a space devoid of the mandate to perform. Eventually, she succumbed to exhaustion. When Avery awoke hours later, she was in a bed, covered. Daman occupied the couch, his jacket a makeshift pillow, a sentinel still maintaining his distance, attempting to impose control on a situation spiraling beyond it. The subsequent 3 days unfolded in a strange tableau of domesticity. No dynasty, no obligations, no artifice, just Avery and Daman suspended in a remote reality, learning the grammar of authenticity. Their conversations explored mundane territories, literary preferences, formative humiliations, the small artifacts that constitute a self. Daman divulged the unvarnished narrative of his father, discovering the body, the funeral where the 8-year-old Vascari heir was forbidden the release of tears. He spoke of the nightmares that laid siege to his psyche for years. Avery recounted the story of her mother, of a diagnosis delivered too late, and the agony of witnessing the person you love become a stranger to their own life. She confessed to the guilt of her infrequent visits, each one a new variation of torment. "You are a devoted daughter," Daman told her one evening as she prepared a meal. "I am a derelict daughter. I haven't visited in weeks." "Because you are ensnared in a life you did not choose. That is not your burden." "It feels it though it is. Most burdens do. That does not make them real." He passed her a knife. "Here, channel your guilt into these onions." On the 4th day, Mason materialized with a resolution. The lawyers had executed their purpose. The chapel was compensated, the video was erased, and a new public narrative was deployed. The images were deceptive. A young couple, a spontaneous elopement, an excess of champagne, a spectacle of no significance. "It won't entirely neutralize the story," Mason reported, "but its momentum will fade. Within a week, possibly 2. "And my family?" Daman inquired. "Gabriella managed them. She dismissed it as tabloid fiction. Lorenzo accepted it." "Lorenzo's judgment is failing. He would accept any narrative that preserves his ascension plans." "Nevertheless, the tactic was effective." Mason then turned his gaze to Avery. "You are both cleared for return." Home. The word itself felt dissonant. That estate was never a home. It was a theater of operations. To return was to reassume the masks, and Avery was no longer certain she recalled her script. The drive back to Vegas was a vessel of silence. The city's lights emerged on the horizon, a synthetic promise. Avery watched it approach, a knot of dread constricting within her. She felt a deep aversion to returning, to resuming the performance of Mrs. Viscari. For 4 days she had simply been Avery, and she was only now grasping the profoundness of that loss. "We must address what transpired," Daman said, guiding the car into the driveway. "Must we?" "Yes. And if I have no desire to, then we will not. But eventually what? We concede this arrangement is no longer a performance? That we have traversed a boundary from which there is no retreat?" Avery faced him. "What is the strategic objective here, Daman? This contract expires in 2 months. What follows?" "I do not know." "That is an insufficient answer." "It is the only one I possess." He silenced the engine. I do not know how to navigate this. Look, I lack the capacity to give you what you deserve. But His voice fractured, the words failing to form. I cannot release you. But our agreement dictates? The agreement is irrelevant, he interjected. This is merely a request from me, not the proprietor of this estate, not your contractual husband, me. Do you want this? Avery's heart beat a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was the precipice. To stay was to risk immolation. To leave was to return to a void. There was no winning maneuver. I don't know, she whispered. Damon simply nodded, saturated with a disappointment he had clearly anticipated. Understood. Inside, the mansion felt altered, its perceived warmth a deception. The air now thin and cold. Or perhaps Avery had changed because after 4 days of authenticity, she could no longer sustain the pretense. Sleep was not a viable option that night. She remained in her cold bed, tracing the shapes of shadows on the ceiling. From across the hall, she could hear Damon's familiar, restless pacing. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand, a message from a number she had tried to expunge from memory. Your time is up. Tomorrow, midnight. The message was pure intimidation. Arrive alone, or the consequences would be irreversible. A cold dread seized her. Her thoughts fragmented as she launched herself across the hall, bursting into Damon's room. He pivoted, the reaction of a predator sensing an imminent threat. What is it? She remained silent, extending the phone. In his eyes, she witnessed a darkness previously unseen, a rage so pure, so focused, it was utterly lethal. That sharp question hung suspended in the charged air. Her response was barely audible. He was already in motion, phone pressed to his ear, a commander summoning his forces. Initiate a trace, he ordered. Locate them. Turning to her, his voice became an immovable object. You are not going. Her objection withered before it was spoken. It is a trap, he stated, his tone devoid of inflection. A maneuver to separate you from my protection. I will not permit it. Her fear manifested as a small query. But what if it is not? Then I will resolve it. He closed the distance between them, his hand on her shoulders, anchoring her to the eye of the storm. Listen to me. You will remain here. You will not go anywhere without me or Mason. Is that understood? Her subdued nod was the only assent he required to draw her into a fierce embrace. Pressed against him, their hearts hammered out an identical frantic cadence. He whispered a vow into her hair. I will not allow them to harm you. This concludes with me. Her reply was a mere exhalation. How? His answer was chilling. By becoming the monster they perceive me to be. The following day was a study in slow-motion agony. Mason transformed their environment into a fortress, adding 3 new stoic guards to the perimeter. Damon's day was a sequence of cold directives, barked orders whose strategic implications Avery could not grasp. Night descended, encasing the house in a sealed tomb. Yet, the anticipated assault never materialized. The silence deepened, becoming absolute and unnerving. At 1 a.m, Damon finally spoke. A feint. Their objective was to terrorize you. The question of who lingered for 2 days before the answer presented itself, unbidden. Gabriella stood at their entrance, her expression like carved stone. A meeting is required, she announced. The 3 of us. They convened in Damon's study, where the family's matriarch appeared diminished, burdened by a fatigue Avery had never witnessed. Without preamble, Gabriella delivered the revelation. It was Marco! The sole indication of its impact was the clenching of Damon's jaw. What? He contracted someone to intimidate her, she clarified, to compel her to flee. He gambled that her disappearance would compromise your position with Lorenzo, creating an opening for his own bid for power. Your evidence? Last night, Gabriella stated, he arrived at my home, intoxicated, and confessed the entire foolish scheme. He considered it humorous, a clever play. Gabriella's features hardened into granite. Not clever, imbecilic, and now he constitutes a threat to our entire structure. Damon's question was immediate. Where is he? Contained. My people are managing him. Her gaze shifted from him to Avery. But this is far from concluded, Damon. Marco's desperation makes him an unpredictable element. The true conflict begins after Lorenzo is gone. You must be prepared. I am. No, she interrupted. You are compromised. This attachment to her has rendered you vulnerable. Damon was on his feet instantly. Leave, Gabriella, I said. Leave. In her absence, the room was suffocated by silence. Avery observed Damon pacing, a man at war with his own nature, and she witnessed the precise moment that battle was decisively lost. The quiet was shattered by the violent impact of his hand against the desk. This is my culpability, it is, he hissed. How can you possibly say that? I am the one who dragged you into this world, he retorted. I made you a target. He paused, turning to her fully. You must leave immediately while the option still exists. Take the funds, disappear. Erase every trace of this existence. His voice was hollow, devoid of want. What I desire is irrelevant. It is relevant to me, she insisted. His response was a single, pain-laced question. Why? I descend from a line of damaged men. I am controlling. I have systematically dismantled your life and placed you in mortal danger. What possible justification could there be to remain? She moved forward, eliminating the space between them. So near she could sense the fear fueling his rage. Because you remember I prefer inexpensive vanilla creamer, she murmured. Because you are the one who stands watch over me at night. The one whose kiss felt like the only real thing. Her voice faltered. And perhaps I am weary of retreating. Perhaps I am choosing to stay, to confront what is coming regardless of the terror, even if it leads to our mutual destruction. Perhaps you are a risk I am willing to take. Damon stared, bewildered, as if she were speaking an unknown tongue. You are irrational. Likely, she conceded. But I am still here. His question was a challenge. For how long? I cannot say. Do not ask me for assurances I do not possess. Her fingers clenched the fabric of his shirt, drawing him closer. I am here with you. Is that not sufficient? His words collapse into a kiss, an act not of tenderness but of pure desperation, like a drowning man finding oxygen. Avery's response is a mirror of this chaos, an outpouring of months of fear, confusion, and forbidden desire. When they part for air, their foreheads meet in a moment of shared fragility. I don't know how this functions, neither do I. We will likely fail. Perhaps, but we will confront that failure together. This pact of mutual ruin proves prophetic. 3 days following Gabriella's warning, Marco disappears. He's not deceased, Damon states, his voice clinical, merely reassigned. He was dispatched to a family compound in Italy, under the singular directive of never returning. The decree came from Lorenzo's deathbed. The voice frail, but the judgment absolute. The family does not endanger the family. Marco violated the principle. This was his consequence. Will he be protected there? Avery inquires. More so than here, Damen confirms. Our grandfather's clemency is finite, yet exile is not execution. Marco is permitted to live. He is simply no longer one of us. And his accomplice? Addressed. Avery understood not to probe the meaning of addressed, learning that certain truths thrive best in shadow. The entire climate of the residence shifted thereafter. While the security detail remained, the nature of the tension had transformed. Avery's role evolved from that of a captive to an asset requiring protection. The change was subtle, yet profound. Damen ceased treating her as fragile and began viewing her as an associate capable of facing harsh realities. He spoke of failed negotiations, of relatives circling Lorenzo's throne like carrion birds, and of the relentless power dynamics where only dominance earns respect. You are not obligated to tell me this, Avery offered one evening. A genuine meal, just the two of them, eating from containers with the staff dismissed. On the contrary, I am. You inhabit this world now, completely. You have a right to understand the peril, the forces we contend with. His gaze met hers, ignited by a new intensity. Yes, we. The pretense between them was fully dismantled. Avery relocated to his bedroom, though many nights were spent in conversation, mapping geographies of their souls in darkness. Damen spoke of the horror of discovering his father. Avery recounted the instant her mother's consciousness fractured when she regarded her own child as a stranger. They were presenting their wounds to one another like sacred artifacts, attempting to construct something genuine from the ruins of their pasts. There is something you must know, Damen said one morning as sunlight flooded the room, illuminating the desert beyond. Lorenzo is declining far more rapidly than anticipated. His physicians now speak of weeks, not months. A knot formed in Avery's stomach. I am deeply sorry. Do not be. He has come to terms with it. He admitted yesterday he was weary of the battle. Damen's hand found hers beneath the blankets. But this accelerates the entire sequence of events. Everything is about to escalate. The family will begin their maneuvers. Thus, I require your answer. Are you truly with me? Once he is gone, neutrality ceases to exist. You are either an ally or you are a threat. How sentimental. I am being pragmatic. I know. Avery faced him. I am with you, but I require one vow from you. What is it? When it is over, when power is consolidated and this madness subsides, you must exit. Damen's expression hardened. Exit what? The family enterprise, the elements that operate in the shadows. She presents him with the only two conclusions this life offers: a prison cell or a tomb. Her expression is unyielding, utterly serious. She declares she will not witness him become a sacrifice to this violent legacy. It is non-negotiable. He counters that one does not simply resign from this world. So she challenges him to innovate, to architect a new exit. He possesses the intellect and the necessary ruthlessness. Forge a different route. Her voice fractures as she delivered the core of her argument. Because I love you and I refuse to surrender you to a life you did not choose. The admission hangs between them, spoken for the first time. Damen's face cycles through a series of emotions, finally settling on stark disbelief. Say that again, he breathes. He asks, which section? She responds dryly, the section where I love you. Then she clarifies, I love you, despite your being a controlling individual with secrets and truly terrible taste in Chinese cuisine. He objects, my taste is impeccable. But she dismantles him. You selected sweet and sour pork. That is an offense against gastronomy. Then he confesses in return, "I love you as well." His own admission sounds as if it has been imprisoned for years. He cannot isolate its origin. Perhaps in the chapel, seeing her unvarnished self, or at the hospital when she remained by his grandfather. It could have been yesterday when she insulted his tie, but its reality is undeniable, and he halts, his jaw set. He questions how they can possibly navigate this without destroying everything. She answers, "Then we shatter it and reconstruct it together." Her kiss is a quiet promise. "But you must vow to me that you will try to escape this life before it consumes you." He swears he will, but not immediately. First, he must endure the imminent tempest. That storm arrived with more speed than they had foreseen. By Tuesday, Lorenzo was gone. Avery was with him in his final moments. She had been visiting the old patriarch frequently while Damon managed affairs. Lorenzo appreciated her company. He would recount sanitized versions of his history, erecting an empire from nothing, the decisions that still plagued him, and watching his grandson be forced into a cold, pragmatic mold too early. Lorenzo once told her, his voice a faint whisper, his body failing, but his resolve intact. "You are what he requires. You make him desire to be a man, not merely a king." Avery counters, "He's already a good man." But Lorenzo negates this. "No, he is the weapon I created, sharp, cold, an instrument." The old Don's weary eyes fix on hers. "But you are altering him. You are making him human once more. Do not permit him to lose that after I am gone." She promises he will not. Lorenzo insists. "Swear it. Swear that you will shield the man within the monarch." She swears. A small smile touches his lips. "Good girl." Then his eyes drift shut. For an instant, she assumes he is sleeping. Then chaos erupts as the heart monitor flatlines and staff converge. A hand gently steers her from the room. Damon arrives, his complexion ashen, and they simply embrace while the medical team fights a battle already lost. Finally, it concludes. Within hours, the entire clan descends upon them. Gabriella appears first, her expression a flawless, impenetrable mask. Marco's parents arrive by plane. Aunts, uncles, cousins, a host of strangers Avery has never met, materialize like apparitions at the hospital. All are clad in black, and all are assessing one another like predators. The grief is palpable, certainly, but the raw ambition simmering beneath is just as potent. Lorenzo's death had created a power vacuum, and one could feel the jockeying for position begin. The funeral is a grand spectacle, attended by hundreds of unfamiliar faces. Politicians, chief executive officers, overt criminals, and men who appeared legitimate but likely were not. At the front, Damon's face is a perfect sculpture of sorrow as he delivers a eulogy that sounds impeccable but feels utterly hollow. Afterward, he circulates through the assembly, shaking hands, receiving condolences, performing the role of the grief-stricken heir. Avery observes the man she loves vanish inside this performance. Later that evening, back in their mansion, Damon finally fractures. There are no tears. She is not certain he is capable of them. He just sits on the bed, head in his hands, his whole frame racked with tremors of sorrow, fatigue, and stark terror. "I am not prepared for this," he manages to say. Avery sits beside him. "No one ever is. He just required additional time. I required additional time." "He gave you all that he possessed," she reminds him. "He ensured you were prepared." Damon looks up, his eyes completely unguarded. "Did he? Because I do not feel prepared. I feel like a boy playing sovereign, and they are all on the verge of discovering my imposture. She advises him, then feign it until you actualize it. That has been my strategy since I was pulled into this. And observe where that has led me, he retorts. It led us here, still upright, together. That is more than most individuals receive. He draws her close, and they remain there for an eternity. No words, no strategy, just clinging to each other as the weight of their world presses in. The will was read, following the service. Avery was not in attendance. She was connected to them by matrimony, not lineage, and thus waited at the mansion with Mason, her thoughts consumed by catastrophic possibilities. With every hour of Damon's absence, the apprehension in her stomach intensified. When he finally telephoned, 6 hours later, his tone was unnervingly cold and devoid of emotion. Can you meet me? I require your presence. She has Mason drive her, experiencing only a profound sense of dread. The mansion is an absolute war zone. She can hear raised voices emanating from Lorenzo's study. Someone is weeping, another is shouting about attorneys and betrayal. Mason navigates her through the chaos to locate Damon and Gabriella, who both appear as if they have just endured an explosion. What is happening? Avery's voice is a fragile thread in the tense air. Gabriella then unveils the first of Lorenzo's posthumous decrees. Damien is the sole heir to the entire empire. Every asset, every dollar. Yet there is a condition. A muscle feathers in Damien's jaw. What condition? He asks. Our marriage, she states, is now absolute. No possibility of annulment or divorce. For the next 10 years, any attempt to dissolve their union would redirect the whole fortune to a family trust, leaving him utterly disempowered. Avery's reality fractures. The patriarch, even in death, was playing chess. With cold precision, Gabriella reveals the second decree. Lorenzo had granted Avery complete authority over all family finances, along with an equal vote in major corporate decisions. He has effectively coronated you, Avery, Gabriella notes. I refuse his money, Avery counters. That is no longer an option. More precisely, the wealth belonged to them jointly, contingent upon a decade of marriage. Gabriella's gaze shifts between them. The family is predictably in an uproar. They intend to contest this. Legal challenges are being prepared. They plan to turn your lives into a living hell. But Lorenzo's will was a fortress, meticulously constructed over his final 6 months to be legally impregnable. I need air, Avery murmurs. And before she can be stopped, she pushes through the seething crowd of relatives and escapes into the garden. The desert night is sharp and cold as she wraps her arms around herself, fighting for every breath. 10 years. Lorenzo had bound them together for an entire decade. A part of her recoiled at the cold strategy, yet another part, the one that held genuine affection for Damien, registered a different emotion. Perhaps it was a sense of security, or perhaps it was permission. Lorenzo had essentially commanded them to abandon their pretense. Damien finds her there 20 minutes later, and they stand in silence, observing the neon glow of the Vegas skyline. I'm sorry, he says at last. For which transgression? She asks. For this, for the stipulation in the will for pulling you deeper into my world. He hesitates. And for the reality that even my grandfather's affection was transactional. Perhaps his aim was to shield us by compelling us to remain united. We would have remained united regardless, Avery declares, turning toward him. Wouldn't we? For the first time, Damien's stoic veneer shatters. I cannot affirm that without it appearing as though I am merely complying with the will. Then imagine the will does not exist, she prods. If he had given you everything unconditionally, would you still wish for me to be here? Yes. The word is immediate, stripped of calculation, an echo of pure truth. Yes, I would want you to stay. I would plead for you to stay if it would make a difference. But I cannot offer you a safe existence. I cannot offer you tranquility. I can only offer to become better than the man this family molded. And I offer to love you throughout that entire struggle. That is sufficient, she responds. As she takes his hand, he draws her into an embrace that is both fiercely possessive and deeply protective. But you must still find an exit from this life. You gave me your word. I recall, he affirms. I am holding you to that vow. I know. The ensuing months descend into open warfare. The family fractures along predictable lines. Several of Lorenzo's old loyalists liquidate their assets and retire. The younger generation splinters, some aligning with Damien, others scheming for his downfall. Unexpectedly, Gabriella emerges as a crucial supporter, wielding her influence to quell disputes and neutralize the most significant threats. Yet the predators continued to circle, their hunger for conflict unsated. On some nights, Damien would return appearing as if he had navigated a battlefield, maintaining a stoic silence about the sordid arrangements made to secure his position. Avery, perceiving his inner turmoil, finally confronted him. They were in bed, but he was emotionally distant, 1,000 conflicts visible on his face. She whispered, "I am losing you to this." He retorted, "I am right here beside you." "No, you are not. You are a prisoner in your own mind, orchestrating violence you conceal from me, and I am witnessing you become the very monster you swore you would never be." The accusation landed. He turned to her, finally confessing, "We have an issue with the Castellanos. Victor's nephew feels he is entitled to a larger share." The young man was threatening to seize what he perceived as his due. Avery, ever the idealist, inquires, "Can you not simply increase his portion?" But Damien understood the brutal logic of their world. To do that would be to spill blood and water for every shark in our ecosystem. They would all arrive demanding their tribute. I must establish a boundary. What kind of boundary? Damien's jaw hardened. The sort that ends with a burial? No, Avery whispered, sitting upright. You promised you were finding a way out, not digging yourself a deeper grave. I am, but I must consolidate control first. If I abdicate now, chaos will follow, and innocent people, my people, will perish. And if you remain, you become Lorenzo's phantom, constructing the same cage, forging the same dark allegiances, and in 20 years, you will be on your deathbed, telling our own son to flee. It is not that simple, Hua, he snapped. The world is not governed by justice, but the choice is yours. You can be the man who breaks this generational curse, or the one who perpetuates it. You cannot be both. Their conflict settled into a cold war that spanned weeks, fought in hushed exchanges where each word was a carefully aimed blade. He remained fixated on securing his domain first. She countered that there would always be a new emergency, another pretext to defer their future, a complete impasse. Then, an assassin attempted to eliminate Damien. The attack occurred just after a meeting in Vegas. One moment he was approaching his vehicle. The next, his bodyguard Mason was throwing him to the pavement as bullets shattered the car's windows. The information reached Avery as she was conducting a lecture. She raced to the hospital to find Damien already under examination. I am fine, he stated the moment she burst into the room. A raw scrape from the asphalt marked his brow, but he was otherwise unharmed. The gunman had missed. Mason had been quicker. You're not fine. Someone just attempted to assassinate you. Avery's hands trembled so violently she had to clench them into fists. This was her deepest fear made manifest. I know, Damien said, drawing her into his arms, completely disregarding the attending nurse. I know. And you have been right all along. This ends. We are done. Avery was taken aback. Are you truly serious? 100%. I am finished. Whatever must be sacrificed, whatever empire I must burn to ash, I am walking away. Could it be so straightforward? It is that simple, because the prospect of truly losing you, that is a reality I refuse to inhabit. But extracting oneself from this world is a slow, methodical process. It required a full year of clandestine negotiations and calculated withdrawals. Damien systematically amputated the family's illicit ventures, leaving the remnants for scavengers while preserving the legitimate enterprises. He erected a firewall just robust enough to deter federal interest. It was not a clean extraction, not by any measure. Old allegiances persisted, and outstanding debts remained, tethering him to a realm of blood pacts and shadows. But it was a new dawn. It was enough for Damien to finally breathe, and enough for Avery to cease her anxious scanning of news headlines for his name. The family, as expected, descended into madness, assailing them with threats and hollow blackmail. Tensions erupted at Thanksgiving when Damien's uncle broke a wine glass over his head, screaming that he was desecrating Lorenzo's memory. But Gabriella upheld the ironclad will, and with the old guard's support, the insurrection lost its momentum. By the second anniversary of his ascension, Damien's corporate transformation was finalized. The Viscaris had become a legitimate, almost mundane corporation, a metamorphosis that would have made Lorenzo either swell with pride or turn in his grave. So what does this feel like? Avery inquired one night, shattering the quiet. They were in their bedroom, a space that had finally become a sanctuary instead of a stronghold. She had overwritten the mansion's sterile history with photographs and books, the artifacts of a genuine life. It is strange, overly peaceful. I keep anticipating the next explosion. It will not happen. It always does. Not this time, she affirmed, leaning in to kiss him. We succeeded. Against every odd, we endured. You speak as if the war is concluded, Damien murmured, holding her close. I am not certain it ever is, he conceded. But perhaps that is the essence of survival, simply choosing to remain when flight is the easier path. That is surprisingly deep. I am a changed man. No, you are not. I am attempting to be. Getting closer. 18 months later, they remarried, this time to exorcise the memory of a sordid Vegas chapel. On this occasion, there was no contract, no legal counsel, no emergency exit. It was an authentic wedding, set in a garden purged of Lorenzo's influence. To the astonishment of all, Gabriella wept. Avery donned a simple gown, and Damien wore a suit that symbolized hope rather than dominance. I cannot believe we are doing this a second time, Avery whispered, beneath a trellis of flowers. The third time is the charm. This is our second. I am including the courthouse visit to legitimize the drunken one. That makes 3. That is not how arithmetic functions. The officiant cleared his throat. Whenever you are prepared. They then spoke their vows. Genuine words drawn from their own turbulent story, articulating promises they could at last fulfill, to choose one another, daily. After the I do's, Damien kissed her as if for the first and final time. Was it worth the cost? He whispered against her lips. Ask me again in 50 years. I intend to. Their existence settled into a new cadence, one that resembled peace. Avery returned to her teaching career at a school supported by philanthropy, not by laundered funds. Damien governed his legitimate enterprise from a home office, substituting boardroom power plays for domestic tranquility with his wife. Their union was forged in conflict and reconciliation, a process of learning to be partners without a pre-written narrative. Then one evening, Avery presented a tectonic shift. I want a child. Damien, startled from his work, was utterly destabilized. A child? Yes, a small person. I would like to have one. For how long? The thought solidified about 3 months ago. I was concerned about your reaction. Why would I? The realization dawned on him. You believed I would object. You don't project the image of a paternal figure. My image has rarely aligned with my capabilities. He closed the laptop with finality. Are you certain you want a child with me? There has only ever been you. You realize this will be a catastrophe, don't you? I have no framework for being a father. I suspect your own father didn't either. You'll figure it out. We are going to fail at this spectacularly. In that, we are experts. We have extensive experience. 2 years on, Avery confirmed she was pregnant. It was a deviation from the plan, in a life defined by them. When she informed Damien, his expression was one of receiving the cosmos itself. Are you positive? I performed 4 tests, all conclusive. 4. I am meticulous. He crossed the space between them, enveloping her in an embrace, and for the first time she could recall, his hands were trembling. We are having a child, he murmured, the statement saturated with wonder. A child. I will almost certainly damage this person, and I will be there to help you mend it. She met his lips with a kiss. We can damage it as a team. Their daughter made her entrance on a Tuesday, her cries echoing her father's formidable will and her mother's precise timing. They called her Elena. The moment the infant was placed in Damien's arms, his composure disintegrated. Tears tracked down his face as he gazed at her, as if she were the most sublime and terrifying object he had ever beheld. She is so fragile, Damien whispered. All infants are. What if I let her fall? You will not let her fall. What if she shatters? You are not going to shatter her. You will love her, shield her, and be so absurdly overbearing that she won't be permitted to date until she is 30. He counters, 40. Very well, a negotiation ensues. 35 is the compromise. Damien's gaze shifts from Avery to Elena, utterly adrift. I don't understand how to do this, she responds. Neither do I, but we will learn. It's what we do. And they did, through a maelstrom of beautiful chaos. Elena was a miniature tempest, a baby who waged a year-long campaign against sleep. Avery returned to teaching part-time, her days a blur of formula and fantasies of rest. Damien approached fatherhood with the intensity of a hostile takeover, consuming parenting manuals and obsessing over developmental milestones. She smiled, he declared, entering the room while Avery attempted to rest. That was digestive gas. She's only 3 weeks old. He refused to concede. No, it was a genuine smile. I witnessed it. It was gas, she maintained. It was a smile. She smiled because she recognizes me as her father and loves me. Avery responded with a flat affect. You have officially become unhinged. I am a father. It is the same condition. 2 years later, a son, Marco, was added to their unit. His name, a tribute to Damien's cousin, was a strategic offering of peace that reverberated through the family. His birth began to dissolve old animosities. It is difficult to nurture ancient grievances when there are grandchildren to indulge. Even the ostracized Marco Sr. could attend dinner without inciting a conflict. He spoke of a woman in Italy, 3 children, an entirely new existence. He professed to be a reformed man. The fury within him finally quiescent. His apology to Avery possessed a new sincerity, perhaps because she and Damien had become paragons of reinvention themselves. Then another volume of life concluded. Avery's mother died when Elena was 3, succumbing to a gentle sleep, her mind at last untroubled. Amid the grief, Damien was a silent, steadfast presence, her anchor. He would later recount stories to Elena, constructing for her the grandmother she would never know. And in that moment, Avery understood. This violent, exquisite, complicated life was the victory she had always sought. Do you ever have regrets? The question surfaced in the stillness of the night. They were exhausted, drained by 2 children under the age of 5, and Damien was nearly asleep. Regret about what? He mumbled. Any part of it. The wedding, my decisions, the schism with your family. The ensuing silence was so profound, she assumed he had succumbed to sleep. Then, his voice emerged from the darkness. I regret that night in Vegas, her heart faltered. Why? Because our state was so altered, we retain no memory of it. That one narrative is lost to us. But everything that followed... He turned to face her. No, I do not regret one moment. You were the most magnificent chaos of my life. She scoffed. That is the least flattering compliment I have ever received. He smiled faintly. And yet you married me 3 times. Your sense of judgment is a weakness. As is yours. You married me. The finest decision I have ever made. They drifted to sleep in that configuration, entwined in the dark. Avery dreamt of garish chapels and catastrophic choices, and how the most disastrous night of her existence had become the instrument of her salvation. The years advanced. Elena matured into a formidable young woman, possessing her father's resolve and her mother's compassion. At 7, she declared her intention to become an advocate for the powerless. Marco developed into a charming diplomat who could navigate any situation, yet beneath the playful exterior was a deeply compassionate soul. He has your heart, Damien would observe to Avery. That capacity to see the inherent good in people, however deeply it is buried. The mansion was finely animated, filled with a vibrant disorder that wealth could never procure. Birthdays were chaotic celebrations. Halloween became a month-long creative endeavor, and Christmas mornings saw the floor disappear beneath discarded wrapping as children awoke at 5 a.m. to claim their treasures. Silver threads began to appear in Damien's hair. Avery discovered new lines around her eyes and cherished them as emblems of a life fully embraced. They established a foundation in Lorenzo's name, providing educational and medical support for families in circumstances they knew intimately. And Damien invested himself in it with the same ferocious dedication he once reserved for his criminal syndicate. She observed as the fortifications around his heart finally crumbled, exposing the man she always sensed resided within. They provided futures for children who had been denied them. They lifted the immense burden of medical debt from the shoulders of struggling families. They operated in obscurity, seeking neither recognition nor praise, because the work was not for acclaim. It was to ensure that no one else would have to confront the impossible choices they once faced. For their 10th anniversary, The legitimate one, not the hazy Vegas affair, they returned to the desert cabin. The children were entrusted to Gabriella, who returned them sugared and armed with a carefully curated version of family history. "Do you recall what you said to me in this place?" Avery's voice was a near whisper beside the fire in a space that seemed to suspend time. "I said many things," he replied softly. "You said I was significant?" "You are," he affirmed. "And you said you had nothing to offer me. I remember. You were incorrect. You gave me everything." She rested against him, settling into the space that was hers alone. "You swore you would fight for us, and you never faltered. You are still fighting. For a commitment made under duress, this is more than I ever imagined." Damien kissed her hair. "May I share a secret?" "Always. I was not being truthful that night. I said I did not remember the ceremony, but I remembered portions of it. I recalled your laughter at the dreadful joke told by the Elvis impersonator. I recalled you asking if this was truly what I wanted, and I recall answering yes and meaning it, despite being intoxicated, impulsive, and utterly adrift. I remember the thought that you were the first authentic thing I had touched in years. Then why deceive me? I could not let you feel obligated. I required you to choose me consciously every day, not due to a contract, a testament, or a single moment of madness, but simply because you wished to. And I do choose you daily, even when you exasperate me, especially when I do. Especially then." They remained at the cabin for 3 days, engaging in a recalibration they had not realized was necessary. Upon their return to Las Vegas, the city itself seemed altered, smaller, its seductive danger somehow muted. Or perhaps they had grown more formidable, prepared for any future contingency. Elena graduated from high school at 17, an undeniable presence. She declared her intent to attend law school to defend the common person. Avery recognized her own reflection in her daughter, the same conviction, the same drive to effect change. Harvard extended its acceptance. Damien fought back tears as he left her for her first semester. "She is going to alter the world," he remarked on the journey home. "She has your spirit. She has it from both of us." Marco entered the corporate sphere, choosing environmental technology, building something restorative and new, and severing ties with his family's destructive history. At 23, he finalized his first significant business deal. He called Damien, his voice unsteady with the magnitude of the accomplishment. Damien guided him through the monumental moment. He later confessed to Avery it was the proudest he had ever felt. "More so than when you were named heir? Not even comparable. To witness him construct something of value, that is what endures." The years continued their procession. Gabriella passed away at 89, her mind incisive until the end. She died in her sleep, and a significant portion of Las Vegas attended her funeral. The remainder observed from a safe distance, a mixture of apprehension and respect in their gaze. Damien delivered the eulogy, and this time his reflections on family, loss, and love were entirely genuine. With time, the family unit began its diffusion. Some remained tethered to Vegas, while others departed to forge new legacies. The vast house fell into a profound stillness. In this quiet, Damen and Avery found a shared peace they had grown to treasure, a sanctuary for two, finally free from the tumult. "We endured," Avery breathed one evening as they observed a surreal desert sunset. Now in their 50s, physical frailties were a reality, but their presence together remained a conscious decision. "We did. This was never designed for permanence. No, it was not. Yet here we stand. Here we are. Damon's hand found hers, his fingers weaving into her own. And so, from the crucible of chaos, their partnership functioned like two fractured stones polished smooth by a hurricane, imperfect and prone to error, yet consistently choosing one another, daily. Then came Elena's call, euphoric after winning her first major lawsuit, dismantling a corporate pharmaceutical giant for inflating insulin costs. Hundreds of families received reparations, and thousands more were protected by laws she championed. She was a fusion of joyous tears and laughter, and Avery mirrored her, watching her daughter become a force of nature. "You're a titan, kid," Damon told her. "Well, I learned from the masters," Elena retorted. "Both of you." The call concluded, leaving them in the resonant silence of their home, a living museum to their 2 decades of madness. Walls were a mosaic of photographs, children's drawings still affixed, an entire existence constructed from the ruins. Avery voiced the thought aloud. "Do you suppose Lorenzo ever envisioned this?" Damon scoffed. "I think he merely hoped. That is all any of us can truly do, is it not? Hope and persist." Damon simply echoed, "Hope and persist. And choose love when retreat is the far simpler path." Outside, Las Vegas shimmered, a city of unkept promises, the very stage for their union in a garish chapel, the same city that nearly destroyed them, the precise location where they constructed something that had no right to exist. The enormous diamond on Avery's finger, a relic from that turbulent first morning, captured the fading sunlight. She toyed with it, a monument to a marriage conceived as a fiction that had somehow solidified into her deepest truth. Beside it rested the plain gold band from their genuine wedding. 2 rings, 2 vows, a single improbable love story. Abruptly, Damon suggested, "We ought to renew our vows." "We literally did that 10 years ago." "I am aware. I want to do it every 10 years, to remind ourselves of our purpose." "That is utterly preposterous." "So was marrying a stranger in Vegas. We did that." Avery surrendered to laughter. "Fine, but I am selecting the venue this time." "Agreed." 6 months later, they are renewing their vows in the same garden as their second ceremony. Elena and Marco are present with their partners. The entire loyal cohort who weathered the storm is in attendance. Damon took Avery's hands and began. 20 years ago, I made an irrational decision in a chapel at 3 a.m. I married a woman I had never seen, fueled by alcohol, confusion, and a search for something nameless. And against every probability, it became this. It became love, a family, a life I genuinely desired. Then Avery, her voice unwavering, responded. 20 years ago, I awoke in an unknown man's house with a colossal diamond on my finger and absolute terror in my heart. I was certain I had made the most catastrophic mistake of my life. I was incorrect. It was the greatest misstep imaginable because it led me here, to you, to this existence, to everything authentic. They kissed, their children cheered, the sun descended, a perfect tableau. Not flawless, not simple, but entirely real. That night, she posed a question to Damon. "Do you ever consider what might have occurred if we had obtained that annulment, if I had simply left?" "Every single day." "You do?" "I do. And every day I am grateful you remained, even when I am unbearable. Especially then. It signifies you are still here, still selecting me. Always." And so the years continued to unfold. Elena married at 32 to a woman who made her laugh, challenged her, and loved her intensely. Marco followed at 35, wedding his university sweetheart in a ceremony that moved everyone to tears. Grandchildren began to arrive, 3 and 5 years, and the quiet mansion was once again filled with holiday clamor. Daman finally retired at 65, transferring his legitimate enterprises and making Avery his sole occupation. They traveled, they read, and they sat on their terrace watching sunsets, discussing everything and nothing. Occasionally, Avery would see him simply gazing at her with an inscrutable expression. "What?" she would ask. "It's nothing, just immensely glad you are here." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know, anywhere. You could have been anywhere, but you stayed right here, with me." "There is no other place I would rather be." For their 30th anniversary, he returned her to the point of origin, the chapel where their entire chaotic narrative began. It seemed smaller to Avery now, its cheap veneer worn down to something gritty and genuine. The same aging Elvis impersonator still occupied the stage, his voice weathered by time. "Daman, why are we here?" Avery whispered. "Because I needed to recall the feeling of that night, before everything became so convoluted." Life was already convoluted then. A fair point. Daman tightened his grip on her hand. "But I wanted to stand here with you, sober this time, and tell you that if I had to repeat it all, the contract, the deceptions, the fear, the conflict, I would, without hesitation, because every step of it led me directly to you. You have softened in your advanced years. I am not old. We are 70. That is not old, it is vintage." Avery's laugh was a low murmur as she drew him closer. "I would repeat it all, too. Every piece, even the broken parts. Especially those parts. They forged our identities. In that low-budget chapel, with the specters of their younger selves as witnesses, they exchanged their vows once more. Not for a minister or an audience, solely for themselves. Two souls who had faced every conceivable storm and were still standing. "I love you," Daman said. "I know. Still. Always. Even when I'm old and difficult. Most of all, then." They emerged into the Vegas night, a city of shattered dreams, possessing the only one that ever yielded a return. The city remained unchanged, but they were fundamentally different people. They had become things they never intended. Partners, lovers, parents, and eventually grandparents. They had become each other's sanctuary. And that, ultimately, was the entire narrative. Not the reckless gamble of a wedding or the ruthless empire, not the peril or the drama or the staggering odds. It was merely the story of two people who made a disastrous choice in a neon-lit chapel and, defying all logic, cultivated it into a love that would not surrender. They lived, they contended, they repaired, they chose each other repeatedly, particularly when it was difficult. And 30 years after a morning of pure terror, Avery awoke to absolute tranquility. Daman was beside her, his hair silver, his face a cartography of their shared life. He remained her anchor, her constant, her choice. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." "Coffee." "Always." They would rise together, a ritual honed over 30 years, and face another day. Another opportunity to make the same conscious choice. Another day to demonstrate that from utter catastrophe, something extraordinary can emerge. The ring on her finger flashed, refracting the light into 1,000 miniature rainbows. The very same ring, its promise finally substantiated by time. She once awoke staring at an unknown man. Now she awoke beside the man who understood every facet of her soul. He had witnessed the darkest corners of her heart and never once averted his gaze. The man who, with her, constructed a life from embers, courage, and a slurred "I do" in a chapel. Their world was never perfect, but it was theirs, and that was sufficient. Far more than sufficient. It was everything.
Life lesson. Sometimes the greatest tragedy is not betrayal itself, but how deeply people long to be loved by the ones who wound them. Night hangs over the city like velvet soaked in gasoline. In the hospital corridor, fluorescent light washes every face into the same exhausted color. Machines pulse behind a half-closed door. Somewhere in the distance, a monitor keeps time with the slow, stubborn rhythm of a man refusing to die. And in that sterile silence, the truth of the story becomes unbearable. People do not break only when they are hated. They break when love arrives wearing the face of danger. He moves through the world like a man carved from granite. Every gesture is measured, every glance is restrained. Even grief seems to stand at attention in his body, as if sorrow itself requires permission before entering. Yet the camera would betray him. It would linger on the slight tremor of his hand after a gunshot, on the way his jaw locks when his grandfather speaks of duty, on the way his eyes soften only when no one else is looking. He is not heartless. He is over-armored. That is worse, because armor convinces a man he is safe even while it slowly suffocates him. She, by contrast, begins as someone almost erased by life. The unpaid bills, the sick mother, the humiliating arithmetic of survival have already dimmed her world long before she enters his mansion. When she steps into wealth, the lighting changes, but the loneliness does not. Silk cannot silence grief. Marble cannot comfort fear. And that is the quiet heartbreak of her journey. She does not fall for power. She falls for the glimpses of boyhood still trapped inside a dangerous man. The tragedy deepens because both of them recognize the contradiction too late. He is the enemy and the shelter. She is the bargain and the miracle. Each one becomes the other's wound and remedy at the same time. In another film, that contradiction would be romanticized. Here it is mourned, because the audience understands what they understand. Love born in a broken house will always carry the echo of falling glass. And yet there is something almost sacred in the way they keep returning to each other. Not because they are naive, but because damaged people often recognize sincerity the way shipwreck survivors recognize fire from far away. The world around them is loud with ambition, bloodline, inheritance, performance. But their most meaningful moments happen in pauses. A coffee ordered because she mentioned it once. A blanket tucked over her sleeping body. A forehead resting against another forehead in the dark because words can no longer hold the weight. That is where the life lesson lives, not in the grand vows, not in the spectacle of weddings, funerals, or empires collapsing. It lives in the unbearable truth that human beings are often loved imperfectly by people who were themselves taught love incorrectly. Some become cruel because cruelty was language. Some become guarded because tenderness was once punished. And still, beneath all that ruin, they ache to be seen. The story therefore asks for mercy without denying damage. He cannot undo what built him. She cannot pretend the danger was harmless. The past does not disappear just because two people kiss under firelight. But tragedy becomes redemption when pain stops being passed forward. In the final frame, what matters is not that they escaped unscarred. It is that they refused to turn their scars into inheritance. The man once raised to preserve an empire chooses instead to preserve a family. The woman once desperate enough to sell 6 months of her life chooses finally not survival alone but fullness. And that is the lesson the camera leaves behind like smoke after the gunfire fades. Love is not proven by intensity. It is proven by what a person becomes to keep another soul safe.